Of Ichigo's close circle of friends, I personally have always found Uryu to be the most interesting among them, and for me it's always been really satisfying watching his gradual evolution throughout the series, going from that kind of weird fringe friend who no one's really sure if they like that much, the hybrid between something of a reluctant friend and kind of an enemy/rival, all the way through to, say, the end of the Arrancar arc, when he truly has evolved into one of Ichigo's closest and dearest friends, potentially even usurping the position of best friend away from Chad, as someone who can perhaps more reliably understand and sympathise with Ichigo's level and status, and is also afforded one of the very exclusive positions atop the dome to witness Ichigo's darkest moment. And I think that small section there really does a whole lot for their friendship, and it establishes a level of camaraderie between the two of them, this understanding that they do actually have each other's backs, which is a role that Chad sadly used to fill. And in my opinion, this is only reinforced further in the execution arc, when Chad, at the start, it really seems like Kubo's doing good things for this character and his relationship with Ichigo, but unfortunately for Chad, he succumbs to Tsukishima's mind control, essentially, and it is once again Uryu who is there to bail Ichigo out and see eye to eye with him on the same level. So for me, Uryu has always been a very fascinating character to follow throughout the series, and I think he has a huge fan following as a result. Now, for those of you who maybe weren't there when Bleach was coming out weekly, as we were going into the final arc, the 1,000-Year Blood War, information was sparse, however speculation was rife, and we went into this arc with the understanding that each of the prior arcs had been somehow belonging to one of Ichigo's close friends. The Soul Society arc was Rukia's, the Arrancar arc was Orihime's, the Fullbring arc was Chad's, and so many of us assumed, fairly I think, that the final arc would probably be Uryu's, fueling speculation further that somehow the Quincy were going to return in a major way. And of course, we were right on all accounts. And because of this, I think most of us expected Uryu to play some kind of a major pivotal role in the final arc, giving him a unique perspective in the story that he's never had before. And now that the final arc is all said and done, we can say honestly that yes, Uryu does play an interesting and unique role in this arc, but whether it lived up to its full potential or not is something I want to discuss in this video. So from this point on, there will be spoilers for the final arc of Bleach that so far has only been released in the manga, so if you haven't read it yet, or you are very cautious of spoilers, I would go maybe watch this video at a later date, but if you just don't care that much, or if you have already read it, then this is perfect for you. In this video, we're going to be looking at Uryu's role in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, how it kind of relates to the fact that he had such an interesting status beforehand as the last Quincy, and whether or not he was really used in the best way in the final arc or not. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. Before we begin, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now. If you're a fan of Bleach, help push this channel towards 60,000 subs. I would really appreciate the support. Give the video a thumbs up as well if you enjoyed it, because it does help with exposure on YouTube. And also, I do now have a Patreon as well, where so many people are already helping support the channel even further, and it's thanks to them that I can keep bringing you videos like this every week. So if you're interested in that, go and check out the link in the description below, and thank you very much. So, as we do with all of these looking at a character's role in the final arc videos, we're going to be going through Uryu's role in the story in this video. However, I want to preface this by saying Uryu is very unique as far as the 1,000-Year Blood War arc is concerned. He is one of the only characters who we kind of went into this arc with a preconceived expectation for. And that's because prior to this arc, being a Quincy held a lot of weight in the world of Bleach. He was the only Quincy in the series for a very long time until we learned about his father, Ryuken, and then it still was only the two of them. They were the only two left from this supposedly almost mythical race of warriors. Fast forward then to the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, and it's revealed that actually the Quincy are not only still alive, but they are commanding a colossal empire from the shadows, poised to destroy the Soul Society. And if that sounds like a big deal, that's because it is an enormously big deal with huge ramifications for the story. And rightly so. I think it set off a lot of questions for fans as to what was actually going to happen to Uryu in this arc. And it's difficult because we know that Uryu has a lot of loyalty to his Quincy heritage. One of his favourite sayings back in the older chapters was, on the pride of the Quincy, I'm going to do this. He holds his grandfather's teachings in incredibly close regard. However, the Vandenreich have kind of come out of nowhere as this almost like bastardization of what it means to be a Quincy. They've not experienced the same growth that Uryu and his father have. In some ways, the ISHIDA'S have almost remained stagnant, whereas the Vandenreich have taken twisted steps to become something even greater than Quincy's in many ways. Almost looking to be like a sort of warped model of what a future Quincy could be, which I think is really cool. The ISHIDA'S in many ways seem to cling on to more of the traditionalist values of the Quincy, whereas the Vandenreich, in their pursuit of power enough to destroy the Gotei 13, because that's clearly what's going on here. Yhwach has attempted to amass a military fighting force capable of surpassing the Gotei 13, and in doing so they have become something decidedly not that Quincy, something almost unholy, with the drinking of Yhwach's blood and having letters etched into their souls. In many ways, they've become monsters, and I think this is something that Kubo really did want to show off. And for many of us then, we were kind of asking the question, is Uryu really going to, like, sympathise with these guys? They seem to be monsters. They're very clearly themed on Nazis. They're subjugating Hueco Mundo. And Kubo does a couple of interesting things at the very beginning of this arc to kind of set you on edge as far as Uryu's character goes, things that he's not really done before. So you get a couple of nice moments, a couple of slice-of-life moments at the very beginning of this arc where Ichigo and his friends are dealing with day-to-day stuff. Ivan as Gyaro shows up, there are a bunch of hollows that show up in Karakura Town. And Kubo drops a couple of hints very early on that something might happen between Ichigo and Uryu later in this arc. Orihime rather randomly points out how happy she is that the two of them are now such close friends, and then later on in the Battle of Hueco Mundo, Ichigo mentions how he hasn't been attacked by Uryu's arrows for a very long time. Therefore setting some kind of expectation in the back of your head that maybe they're going to come to blows at some point in the future. Uryu also mentions something kind of weird, in my opinion. I think this also felt like it came a little bit out of nowhere, in that he refuses to go and help Dondachaka because Quincy exists to destroy hollows. And that felt really weird to me. That felt a bit strange because it does kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere. He works with hollows in the Rankar arc to fight for the greater good, essentially. You know, Pesce, Dondachaka, Nell, and that lot. And it just seems kind of weird to me that he now would just refuse to go and help one. It doesn't really feel like Uryu's character. Uryu is all about helping the little guy. You know, he always has been. On the surface, he's supposed to be cold and calculating and somewhat distant, but if a friend or a comrade is in grave danger, he'll do so. And let's remember that Uryu has absolutely no love for the Shinigami, and yet he was disgusted by the way Mayuri was treating Nemu and was trying to do everything he could to help her in such a horrible situation. So at the start of this arc, when it's revealed that Hueco Mundo has been enslaved, essentially, and Dondachaka is kidnapped, it always kind of rubbed me the wrong way that Uryu basically is just flat out like, I'm not going to come with you this time. It's obviously done to separate Uryu from the rest of the group. This is a degree of separation that's supposed to make it hit harder later on when it looks like he's gone behind their backs. Now, this is actually the last time we see Uryu for ages, because you get the whole first invasion, you get the whole first big fight, and again, like I said, it focuses on Ichigo and the rest of his friends, and you're kind of left to wonder what is going on with Uryu. And I actually want to say that I think a lot of people called that Uryu would join the Sternritters. It did seem like that was what was going to happen after Kubo created that separation between the friends. But that it doesn't make that moment any less impactful. At the very end of the Everything But the Rain mini-arc, Yhwach and Hashwolf reveal that they have recruited Uryu, and this is the next time we've actually seen him, sporting some really cool looking uniform as well. That's, you know, clearly if you're going to join the Vandenreich, it's because they have badass gear. Now there's always this I want to come around to this point now, because this is a major point in the story where it's revealed that Uryu has joined the bad guys, essentially. These dudes are unequivocally evil. We've been told on numerous occasions that they are essentially the worst of the worst. Senjumaru saying to Ichigo, like, this is Kubo's way of telling us that you thought Aizen was bad. These guys are on a whole nother level, and Uryu has just joined them. You know, he's like walking into the throne room of the big bad who murdered Yamamoto. And yet this whole scene has always been a little bit weird to me. And I kind of want to ask you guys, as readers and fans of Bleach, straight up. How many of you honestly believe that Uryu had turned evil? Like, I just want to let that question sink in. I want you to type out your comments below. How many of you honestly thought that Uryu was a bad guy? Because I'll tell you, I didn't think he was evil for a split second. And like, you can kind of go back and look at my reviews. And it's weird because I don't know what angle Kubo's going for here. The whole thing is kind of set up to make you think that Uryu's gone bad. That's why there's the degree of separation. He doesn't go on his usual adventures with the friends at the very start of the arc. Yhwach calls him his son. The chapter is titled Prince of Light. And you're supposed to think, yeah, that Uryu has gone bad. And yet, this reveal of Uryu joining the Sternritters is set immediately after Everything But the Rain. And during Everything But the Rain, we get vital backstory on Uryu as a character that we have never had before. So Everything But the Rain is a fantastic little segment in the series, as well written as something like Turn Back the Pendulum. Kubo's writing always seems to excel in these like microcosms, and Everything But the Rain is no different. And in this backstory, we get really crucial and interesting information that, you know, Masaki was part of the ISHIDA'S family, essentially, because she was like adopted as the last of the Kurosaki bloodline. The Quincy's are all like obsessed with pure bloodlines and stuff like that, which feeds into that Nazi ideology that the Vandenreich now kind of espouse. And we also find out Uryu's mother was a character called Kane Katagiri, a maid in the Ishida household who eventually ends up with Ryuken. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a massive piece of information. It's one of those tiny little, almost like nice little lore nuggets that the Thousand Year Blood War arc, in my opinion, is so good at. Really fleshing out the world of Bleach, which I love. But what is crucial here is that we find out that Yhwach was responsible indirectly for the death of Masaki, and also for the death of Kane Katagiri, using Ausvalen to steal their powers. That caused Masaki to lose in battle to Grand Fisher, but Kane was apparently already frail and sickly, and she basically just dropped dead because this is not that long afterwards. You know, you see there's a really nice shot of like a photo of her on Ryuken's desk, showing that obviously that he's never forgotten about what happened to her, which will come into play much later on. And I just want to say that I actually love the stuff with Ryuken in this arc, as like minuscule as it is, and how much more it should have been. What's actually here is a real good taste of what I think Kubo had really in mind for these characters, for the Ishida family. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is it's really weird that Kubo reveals Uryu as a bad guy just after telling us that Yhwach is responsible for his mother's death. Now, perhaps Uryu doesn't know that, or at least we don't know if he knows that, but you have to imagine that Ryuken might have told him at some point. And so now we're kind of stuck with an interesting situation where the reader is like, is Uryu a bad guy, or is he a double agent? And the double agent thing is obviously more likely. But what's odd is I can't tell if Kubo wanted us to think he was a bad guy or not, because he never goes into Uryu's introspective thoughts until way later on into the series, into the arc. And because of that, you're left with Uryu, who looks like he's wearing a mask. You know, he looks like he's wearing a mask of a villain. And is that just to fool the Vandenreich, or is it just to fool us? And it's really, really weird, but I want to say that I think Uryu joining the bad guys is actually a really nice move, a really cool story twist that I really enjoy. And what's awesome about it is it sets up Uryu for an interesting role in this arc that he may not have otherwise had if he had just stayed as Ichigo's friend. This puts him immediately in the spotlight. He's now part of essentially the main trio of bad guys. And I think that's really cool, and I think it fits for his character. He's a Quincy, therefore it's viable that he would join this resurgent Quincy force. You can imagine him being like, my family, this is my family, essentially. They're back, and I want to help them. But of course, the Uryu we know wouldn't suddenly drop everything to side with the genocidal force going against essentially the new family and friends that he has made. So that's where this conflict comes in. Anyway, we don't really see too much of Uryu moving forwards. There's a little bit with the Vandenreich coming up, though, that's very important, and it takes the whole thing in a totally different direction that I was never expecting. We get the whole Vandenreich Sternritter meeting chapters, which I was dying to see. Like, again, in my reviews, we had gone maybe 30 chapters with no Vandenreich whatsoever after the first invasion. I was dying to see them again. And we finally got 543 letters where we saw the Vandenreich all kind of coming together. And it's at this meeting where things take another abrupt left turn with Uryu's character in the final arc. Yhwach basically announces to the Sternritter that he is making Uryu his heir, the heir to the Vandenreich Empire. This is, again, super weird, kind of comes out of absolutely nowhere. It's designed, I think, to just create tension among the Sternritter. None of them are happy about this. None of them have even seen Uryu prior to this point. And Yhwach's just like, you're my heir. This does a couple of things for the reader as well. It makes us think maybe Uryu's status as the last Quincy is going to hold some kind of importance or some kind of reverence among the Vandenreich. But also, how sincere is this whole setup? Who's trying to fool who? If Uryu really isn't a bad guy, then he's doing a decent job at getting close to Yhwach. But, like, is Yhwach the kind of guy who's really planning for his defeat, his death? I don't know. And why make Uryu the heir and not Hashwolf, which is a big point of contention that comes up between the Sternritter. We get a nice little conversation between Yhwach and Uryu where Uryu kind of questions why he did this, and Yhwach says that when he used the Ausvalen a long time ago and he robbed the powers of loads of impure Quincy, Uryu survived. And I think Uryu's... it's always been a little bit muddled, but I think Uryu is an impure Quincy because Kane was a Gemished Quincy, which is a half-blood Quincy, and Ryuken was an Ect Quincy, which is a true-blood Quincy. Then they mixed, and unfortunately that means Uryu is now mixed as well. So basically Yhwach was expecting him to die, but somehow he survived. I think this is never explained. This is something I do want to get into as we move on later into the story, but I think it's never explained. I think you're supposed to assume it's something to do with Uryu's innate antithesis powers, but that is a can of worms that we will get into later on. So, Uryu's been made the heir. No one's happy about it. Everyone's finding the whole situation a little bit weird. It then does kind of feel like a bit of a rerun of the mental prison that Aizen has supposedly put Orihime in, which Ulquiorra then explains to Noitora after the Espada meeting, yada yada yada. Basically the same thing happens here. Hashwolf explains to his maid that Yhwach has done this so that all eyes will now be on Uryu. No matter where he goes, he will have no privacy. And this is interesting because now it tells me that the Vandenreich actually suspect Uryu of being a traitor. But once again, we're offered no insight into Uryu's mind, so we have no idea. But now we can kind of assume, okay, he probably is he is a traitor, because now they don't trust him. Apparently Yhwach doesn't really trust him, at least according to Hashwolf anyway. And so we're getting I'm getting the feeling at this point that Uryu's traitor story is a little bit thin on the ground. It's a little bit wishy-washy. And I think the primary reason for that is we don't spend enough time with Uryu. Uryu has an interesting role in this arc, and he has the potential to have a really interesting role in the arc. The problem is, Kubo, it feels like he's like waiting and waiting and waiting to give Uryu his big moment, and it never comes because he runs out of time, essentially. In that Sternritter meeting, Yhwach says, I'm not going to listen to objections. Uryu will show you his power in the battles to come. That never really happens. Again, there's a lot of setup for something that doesn't really work. But it is a shame because I think it's a really interesting and unique position for Uryu to be in. It's kind of like the rescue arc for Rukia and Orihime, but flipped on its head. Uryu has taken charge of his destiny here and thrown himself in deep with the sharks. And I kind of like that. I like that, but we just should have seen more of it. But anyway, if we move on, we don't see Uryu again now until the invasion into Soul Society, the second big invasion. And it's cool seeing him up on top of the building with Yhwach and Hashwolf, establishing himself as the third in the trio of villains, the new Aizen, Gin, and Tozen. And it's really cool seeing him up there. Like I said, it's super refreshing and interesting seeing one of Ichigo's friends essentially leave that bubble and do something in the plot. I think that's really cool. Unfortunately, Uryu acts as a bystander for almost the entire time he's doing this sort of thing, basically walking in Yhwach's shadow. At kind of the midpoint in this second invasion, the early stage anyway, we actually get to see Uryu again just after Master Masculine has been defeated. And we get a fascinating chapter, a genuinely fascinating chapter called God Like You. And it starts with Yhwach's asleep, essentially, and therefore he's vulnerable, and Uryu is, like, making his way to Yhwach's chambers. Ostensibly, I do think this is meant to make you think he's going to do something. He's up to no good. Like, is he going to try and assassinate Yhwach, something like that? It's definitely framed as being a bit dodgy. Hashwolf is not happy about it. He's acting very suspicious. And you get a great moment between Uryu and Hashwolf, which I think works really, really well, actually, where Hashwolf is, like, bitter about Uryu being the heir, which, again, doesn't really seem to jive with him supposedly knowing Yhwach's plan, but you get a nice moment where Hashwolf kind of puts the fear of God into Uryu, quite literally, essentially. Hashwolf reveals that he knows Uryu is kind of only there to avenge his mother's death. There's a really nice moment where he, like, comes in really close to Uryu, stops him from getting away. And he's like, you're in too deep now. There's no way out for any of us. And I remember reading this chapter. And again, I think I kind of want to say I called it. I think most people called it, to be honest. But I said that by the end of this arc, there is no way these two characters are not going to have a fight. And it's really well done, because Hashwolf is kind of like saying to Uryu, you're in with the sharks now. There's no way out. I know that you only came here to avenge your mother, but you're in too deep. You've already had a letter carved into your soul. A part of His Majesty lives within you, and when you die, like the rest of us, you will go back and help His Majesty become more powerful. And it's this real great sense of hopelessness that permeates the Vandenreich, and I think it's done really well in that Godlike You chapter. But to be honest, that Godlike You chapter was a bit weird, because Hashwolf's admission about Uryu just kind of tells you immediately that Uryu's not a bad guy, but again, Kubo doesn't really confirm it in any way, so that's a bit weird. But then later on we do get the first major conflict. Uryu doesn't really do anything until Yhwach prepares to assault the royal palace, and we get our first really kind of interesting moment here when Ichigo discovers the truth. He attempts to attack Yhwach, only for Uryu to reveal himself standing by His Majesty's side. And we get the first moment of the Ichigo-Uryu conflict here. It's kind of what you would expect, Uryu telling Ichigo not a lot, basically just saying, like, get out of here if you value your life, you can't stop His Majesty. Ichigo just shouting again and again, like, what are you doing? Why are you siding with them? Ishida, what's going on? Etc, etc. Nice moment where Ishida uses a licked Reigen to attack Ichigo, but Orihime blocks it. But even here, you can kind of see that Uryu is, like, his heart is not really in this. So the whole situation is weird, because you have to assume that the bad guys don't really think Uryu is on their side, and the readers don't really think Uryu is on their side. So the whole situation is kind of weird, but there is a nice moment where Yhwach says to Uryu, we're going to leave now, have you said goodbye to them, because it will be forever? And Uryu's like, yes, I have, and then they all ascend to the royal palace. And it's interesting, because, like, Yhwach has this, like, twisted way of, like, caring for Uryu, seeing him as his son, essentially, which he also kind of does for Ichigo as well. But yeah, that initial meeting between everyone, I think it's effective. I think it gets the job done. I'm obviously looking at the story now with the benefit of hindsight, but when I read it back in the day, it was effective. It was really good seeing Uryu firing those arrows at Ichigo, Orihime arriving to defend Ichigo from her friend. Again, it's like a flip on the Tsukishima stuff in a way, but it's kind of more effective here because they all actually do know each other. And Orihime also looks really sad about it. And it's these characters who went through so much on the dome are now turned against one another. And there's a couple of nice moments like that littered throughout, like Renji and Rukia. Renji saying, did you see what happened? And Rukia's like, yeah, Ishida, how could you do this? I think now's a good moment to bring up the whole Sternritter stuff, because it's almost completely ignored after this moment on. But supposedly being the Vandenreich's heir is something that the Sternritters really care about. Most of them apparently thought that Hashwolf was going to get it, understandably. And, like, Basby is, like, really angry about this, and they all basically hate Uryu. But absolutely nothing comes of that. The closest you get is Basby saying to Renji, oh yeah, you guys used to be friends with that Uryu guy. Don't you just hate it when your friends backstab you? Which I want to believe is foreshadowing for the Hashwolf stuff with Basby later on down the line, but I'm not sure it is. But I want to believe it is. And he says, we hate Ishida as well. If you want, we'll team up to help you kill him. Renji's like really shocked by this, but it is never brought up again. Never. The whole dissent among the Sternritters about the heir is just never brought up again, and it's really weird. So perhaps understandably, during the assault on the royal palace, Uryu really is just completely left to the wayside here. But then so is Hashwolf as well. This is all about the Schutzstaffel characters like that arriving for the first time. You know, considering Kubo was like, Uryu can show off his powers in the future, I'm surprised something wasn't done here to just show you how powerful Uryu has actually become, but it's not. Instead, Uryu is completely left at the wayside just to listen to Hashwolf talk about their 1,000-year prayer. And Uryu, of course, bears witness to the reveal of the Almighty, how Yhwach is in fact essentially a god, the Soul King's son. They then attack the Soul King, they attack the throne room, and this is the next point when we get a nice moment. So Ichigo and his friends have also arrived in the royal palace to try and stop them. There's a clash, and Uryu actually shoots Yoruichi in the back, which I think is quite an interesting moment, because that's... And again, it's handled really weirdly. Like, what are we supposed to think? Like, are we supposed to think Uryu's actually evil or not? Like, I know, obviously, if he really wants to get close to the Vandenreich, then... You know, this is a great way of doing it. And he certainly does the job of proving to the Schutzstaffel, at least anyway, that he's on their side. There's a great moment, actually, where Ichigo is falling off the palace, and Lil Barrow prepares to snipe him and essentially kill him, but Uryu shoots him first, and obviously knowing that Ichigo won't be killed by it, but he's like, you know, I've knocked them off the palace, that's the easy way to get rid of them. And it's actually, this sort of thing is really well done. This I like this. Gerard Valkyrie buys it immediately. Like, he's like, oh yeah, I love this kid. You know, he's part of the gang now. Lil Barrow looking a little bit more suspect, and Hashwolf obviously just doesn't buy it at all. The main question here that I have always wondered, and I think makes it difficult to truly gauge the effectiveness of Uryu's plan, is does Yhwach buy it? Because it's really hard to tell. It seems like at first he does, but then it seems like maybe he doesn't. Certainly when he gets the Almighty, he must be able to see the future. And he kind of goes back to referring to Hashwolf as his first son and stuff like that, which makes me think maybe he stops buying it. But regardless, it's kind of weird that this ultra-powerful, seemingly really efficient military organization allows Uryu to just wander around its new palace, like with no security detail or anything like that. But I will say that I think the relationship, the burgeoning trouble relationship between Uryu and Hashwolf is done nicely. It's a nice through line of consistency throughout the final arc. Even by the time we get to Varvelt, Hashwolf is like, I should never have left Uryu alone, it's way too soon to trust him. And then we get the Basby fight. But yeah, Uryu just kind of disappears. That's the main problem with this finale. This final third is that Uryu just sort of disappears. And then he kind of comes back, and you find out that he's been, like, dropping things all over Varvelt. These tiny little squares that I really wish had some kind of design on them. I don't know why, it just really bugs me that they are just white squares. I just think they could have had something on them. But anyway, apparently what it is they are the same material that essentially made up Uryu's Sunray glove, I think, so that when he detonates them, they will destroy Reishi. They will destroy the Reishi of Varvelt, essentially. And finally, Uryu's plan is revealed. As it looks like he's going to clash with Ichigo and Co. one more time, his plan is revealed. Now, bear in mind, up until this point, things have been kind of weird between Ichigo and Uryu. They don't say anything of substance between each other. Back in the throne room, I kind of skipped over it because it's just not that important, but Ichigo is just shouting at Uryu all the time, being like, why are you doing this? Uryu's like, if I gave you an explanation, would you believe me? It's because I'm a Quincy. I will say, the artwork never falters. The facial expressions are great. Uryu has like this look of disdain on his face, and then much later on here, he has a look of, why are you here? Like, why have you followed me? Which I actually think is done really well, portrayed really nicely. Ichigo kind of coming across as a bit of a blunt instrument during all of this, and just shouting at him, like, you know, turn back to the light, all this sort of thing. And Uryu does finally reveal his master plan. Basically, he didn't tell... He is planning on bringing down the Vandenreich. He now is in Varvelt. He's in the perfect place to annihilate their headquarters using the Sanrei stuff that activates at the touch of his Reiatsu. He didn't tell anyone because basically he has to die to accomplish this. He has to be here when everything blows up because only his Reiatsu can activate it. It's essentially, he believes, like almost like the destiny his grandfather left him. That's why he didn't tell anyone about his kamikaze plan. The whole thing, though, smacks of kind of like anticlimactic stupidity. It sort of comes and then it goes. It's a bit weird. This whole scene is a bit weird. It kind of feels like Kubo's health was starting to really impact the story at this point. He was starting to have to speed things up a little bit. And you do get the sense that things that maybe should have been more grandiose are kind of just brushed over. So like Uryu's master plan to destroy Varvelt is kind of just like said and done in one chapter, and then he kind of like abandons it because he has to fight Hashwolf. So again, it kind of just makes you think, like, if he had this plan, if he had the Sanrei stuff that could destroy the Vandenreich from the very beginning, from the very beginning, it seems like we were right. He wants to destroy the Vandenreich because I guess they killed his mother. There's no real other motivation given, and he wants to stop them from destroying all three worlds like everyone else. I guess he shares the universal motivation. But as far as personal stuff goes, it's just because Yhwach killed his mum, which, you know, is a fair enough motivation. But like, why not just tell the Soul Society you have this technology? Get them to mass produce it. Get them to turn it into weaponry or something that can utterly annihilate the Vandenreich's foundations. Destroy them before Yhwach murders the Zero Division and the Soul King. You know, it's really tough. It kind of reminds me of Geen. You know, it's that whole Severus Snape trope again, where he like gets in really deep with the bad guys to deal some kind of critical blow, like right at the end when they're at their most dangerous. And, you know, at the end of the day, I don't dislike this. I just wish it had been given more room to breathe, given a chance to have the gravitas it deserves. Because it feels like a throwaway plot point. Uryu's been through all of this, and because Kubo, it feels like he's been waiting for that big moment. Uryu's effectively done absolutely nothing for hundreds of chapters. And then we get to Uryu's big moment, and it's too late. It's too late because the clock's run out on Kubo. Like, he's starting to really suffer from his illnesses and stuff, and he's just like, I've got like 3 big fights to finish up as well. Uryu's plot now has to become this thing of secondary importance. And it's like, it's frustrating. It really does suck. You know, it could have been cool if, like, Yhwach was, like, unstoppable, and then Uryu manages to pull off his plan, just freaking blows up Varvelt. He obviously survives somehow. Maybe Ichigo saves him at the last minute or something like that. But, like, it critically wounds Yhwach and makes it so it's possible now for the Gotei to actually fight him and his men or something like that. I don't know. I kind of wish Uryu had just pulled off his plan. Like, at least Geen pulls off his plan and dies afterwards. But Uryu's just is a whole lot of hot air that nothing comes of it. Anyway, Ichigo goes to face Yhwach and Uryu faces Hashwolf, like I said, as predicted. And they don't get a fight. Again, Uryu is kind of tossed to the wayside, and it really sucks, because this is supposed to be his arc. Again, I want to reiterate that I actually do like what we got between Uryu and Hashwolf. It's a real shame that you basically don't see them fight at all. The battle of their Shrifts is weird and intangible, and you don't see any of it, and it's just a one-up game of, like, Hashwolf can bestow misfortune upon Uryu, Uryu can reflect it, Hashwolf can do it back, and it's like, where does the antithesis even come from? What does that have anything to do with Uryu? You know, it's really weird. You know, of all the... because obviously the Sternritter are all new characters, they're effectively, like, designed around their Shrifts. Asnot is the fear, and he looks creepy. You know, Askin is the death-dealing, and all of his abilities look like poisonous kind of stuff. Candice, the Thunderbolt, she looks like she has lightning in her hair and stuff. Uryu, the antithesis doesn't really mean it. Like, there's nothing you can draw visually from that. He doesn't necessarily look like the antithesis of Yhwach or something like that. So it's a really vague and kind of disappointing ability, and that whole bit is just a bit of a mess of, like, expectations not being met for Uryu. But on the flip side, I love the ideological stuff. I love the conversation they have. I think it's honestly fantastic that Uryu comes full circle to admitting that he does everything he does for his friends. That's what he weighs on his own personal scales, which causes Hashwolf to flip out because he knows deep down that he's betrayed his only friend, and therefore weighed up something on his scales that is not really right. Honestly, I love that all so much. I think that's fantastic. Uryu, though, just gets beaten around in this fight. Like, again, we're supposed to believe that he has this great power now. He gets absolutely wiped out by Hashwolf. It's really weird. You know, Hashwolf gets Ausweiland. He then dies. There's another really nice moment where he lets Uryu transfer his wounds to him so he can at least have some chance of defeating Yhwach. And then we get... Obviously, stuff is being sped up a bit now. Ishin and Ryuken arrive. Ryuken Ishida. This is the first time, essentially, he has appeared in the present-day storyline in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. An arc about the Quincy's, and Ryuken has only just arrived. At the very least, I thought back in the day that he was going to take over the fight from Hashwolf. That doesn't happen, which sucks. But Ryuken basically is just there to give Uryu this still silver arrow. And actually, in Kubo's defense, this is foreshadowed. Around the start of the final third of this arc, when they go into the Varvelt stuff, it's revealed that Uryu walked in on his father autopsying his mother's dead body. And, like, that's scarred him for life. But we know that Ryuken has been preparing to take down Yhwach since then. And that kind of thing is really powerful to me. I love that. I think that's really cool, that Ryuken kind of, like, shut his heart off to the world, but he's been busying himself with revenge, essentially, ever since, which I think is really cool. He must have assumed that Yhwach would return at some point, and that they would have to be ready to finish him off once and for all. So I think that works really, really well. And I really like the short conversation they have. I love that it ends with Ryuken being like, you must be the one to shoot this arrow. I think that's the sort of thing that could look amazing in the anime. It's like some incredible music behind it as it swells. Uryu realizes his destiny, the part he has to play in this final battle as his father bestows upon him the key to defeating the god of the Quincy's. He's like, you must be the one to shoot this arrow. And I think that's really great. I just wish there was more of it. I just wish there'd been more build-up, more time with the ISHIDA'S, more time to establish their importance. What does it mean to be the last Quincy in a world now apparently full of Quincy's? You know, what does Uryu mean to the Vandenreich as a whole? What does the Vandenreich mean to Uryu? Does it mean anything that these Quincy are back to him, or does he just not like them? You know, so many questions that I would love for the anime to go into a bit more of this. But then, as you know, Uryu arrives at the site of the final battle, shoots Yhwach in the back with the still silver arrow. I love this moment. I think it's cathartic. I think it's, you know, really satisfying seeing Yhwach like paralyzed in fear as his powers are just stripped immediately away from him, rendering him essentially a normal human being with time enough for Ichigo to cut him in half and kill him. And I think that's just it. That bit is nice. It's really cool seeing Yhwach just like terrified, hit with his own power, the same power he's been using to dominate and terrify Quincy for years. Uryu finally hits him with it himself. And how does Yhwach not see Uryu? I don't know. Is it like a Tozen thing again, where he's not really paying enough attention to what's going on behind him because he's so caught up in the moment? Maybe. Either way, it's not that important. That is, in a nutshell, a pretty long nutshell, a 40-minute nutshell, kind of everything Uryu does in the arc, and you'll notice it's mostly a whole lot of nothing, which is really disappointing. So to summarise Uryu's role in the final arc, and I want to ask the question that's in the title of this video, was Uryu wasted in an arc all about the Quincy? And it's a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of both. I think Kubo is very obviously laying the groundwork for a really cool and unique role for Uryu to play. This traitor, this good guy turned traitor, now right-hand man to the main villains. He's, you know, a Quincy, therefore he's got the backstory with them. It kind of makes sense. But at the same time, he's a double, almost triple agent going in to try and take these guys down from the inside. How much sense does his plan make? Not a huge amount. I mean, it's not bad, but it could have probably been worked in a little bit better. But it's so disappointing in a way to get an arc finally about the Quincy and then predominantly have it about these guys. Now, don't get me wrong. You know that I love the Sternritter, but a lot of them don't really feel like traditional Quincy. That is very much the ISHIDA'S thing. Soken is like brought up 3 times in this arc, and it's completely like insubstantial. Like, it doesn't mean anything, and it's like this would have been such a good moment to really lift the ISHIDA'S up to real prominence and importance, and it feels like it starts like that, and it feels like it was supposed to end like that as well. I love Ryuken bestowing Uryu with the weapon to kill Yhwach, but there's just not enough. It's nearly inexcusable to have an arc about the Quincy and then have Ryuken Ishida only appear 10 chapters from the end for the first time in the present storyline. Like, yes, he's in Everything But the Rain, but yeah, it is a bit annoying, and I hope the anime fleshes it out. Was Uryu wasted? I think it's a bit of both. Yes, undeniably. Like, he does nothing. He has. It's so weird to think that in the Soul Society arc and the Urankar arc, the arc about Shinigami and Hollows, Uryu has character growth, normal character growth. He has fights, Jirobo, Mayuri, Icewinner, Saruchi, Zyle. And throughout these fights, he evolves, he grows, he gets new bows, everything like that. And it's weirdly, like, thrown aside in the final arc. Uryu's new bow is just, like, randomly there. He has some big bow made of light that he didn't have at the start of the arc. You see him with the little one he has in the Lost Agent arc. So I'm guessing this new bow was caused by him drinking Yhwach's blood. And then towards the end of the arc, he has another new bow that it's like 4-pronged bow. And then it's like, where are these coming from? And he doesn't have a proper fight either, which is so disappointing. So yeah, I think undeniably you have to say Uryu was wasted to a degree. But regardless, I liked seeing him in the final arc, get this point of prominence. I thought it was cool. I just think, yeah, more could have been done with the Ishida family on the whole. Alright guys, but I really hope you enjoyed this much longer than anticipated video. Let me know in the comments below, do you think Uryu was wasted or not? I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments below. Like I said, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you are new here for more long-form Bleach content like this to tide you over until the anime arrives. Give the video a like because I really appreciate the support, and don't forget to check out the Patreon as well if you want to help me out with what I do here. But until next time guys, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.